Okay, we ready for tonight?
We don't
There
get
we
very
go.
far. 284 to 313.
Pardon?
284 to 313. 29 years.
Oh,
Our time machine's broken.
yeah.
Not going very far.
Well, in 284, after a short period of relative peace for Christians, Diocletian became the emperor of the Roman Empire. He was, for a couple of years, sort of tolerant of Christians and Christianity because he thought that the Roman gods were not paying attention, which I guess they weren't. But in 286, he did something that Alexander had done many years before. He divided the Roman Empire into two parts, the west and the east. And he appointed, this was under the influence of a close associate, Galerius, and he appointed Maximian as the ruler of the east. And Diocletian, ruler of the west, I'm sorry, and Diocletian was ruler of the east. So these two were Augustus Caesars. They were big Caesars. And Galerius was an assistant Caesar of lower level, but a part of this ruling group. And he also appointed a sub-Caesar, like Galerius, for the west, and his name was Constantius the First. This gave rise to, like it did after Alexander split up the Greek Empire amongst 7 generals, it gave rise to competition between these people and conflict and trying to take over other people's responsibilities and their land. It was after 286, after he did this, that he really turned and began to persecute Christians. And we go into a period under his reign and under the reign of some of these other people, the worst period of persecution in the church. A historian who was alive at that time and really lived before and during and after Diocletian, Eusebius, we've referred to him before, had a perspective on why this intense persecution began. And this is it. Would somebody read that? And think about, when he's talking about conflict, even within the church, realize that Arianism was, among other things, very active and a source of much conflict and increasing conflict within the church.
But increasing freedom transformed our character to arrogance and sloth. We began envying and abusing each other, cutting our own throats as occasion offered. With weapons of sharp-edged words, rulers hurled themselves at rulers, and laymen waged party fights against laymen. And unspeakable hypocrisy and dissimulation were carried out in the limit of wickedness. Those of us who were supposed to be pastors cut off the restraining influence of the fear of God and quarreled heatedly with each other, engaged solely in swelling the disputes, threats, envy, and mutual hostility and hate, frantically demanding despotic power they coveted. Then it was that, in accordance with the words of Jeremiah, the Lord in his anger covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud and cast down from heaven the glory of Israel. At last, while the gatherings were still crowded, divine judgment with its wonted mercy gently and gradually began to order things its own way, and with the Christians in the army, persecutions began.
So that is a perspective of a Christian historian who was alive at the time about these beginning and continuing intense persecutions. In 305, not very long after 286, Constantius I died, and he had a son who was a general in the British Isles and in the West, and very favored by those soldiers under him. And they, at this instant, proclaimed this son of Constantius I, the Roman emperor. And his name, of course, was Constantine. We'll be spending several sessions on him. Also in this year, 305, Diocletian went insane and was replaced as Augustus Caesar by the little Caesar, Galerius. Maximian's sons came into the picture, and they became little Caesars. In the West. Maxentius, and in the East, Maximin. So there's still duplicity. Constantine ruled Britain and Gaul and Spain. Maxentius ruled Italy and North Africa, the West. Maximin was in the Eastern Empire. These two individuals were especially anti-Christian, big on persecution, morally degenerate. They plotted pretty quickly together to kill Constantine, but they were unsuccessful. So that's kind of what's going on. And we'll get back to it. A little bit about monasticism. We talked last time about Eremitic monasticism developing in Egypt. It relates, or the word hermit is derived from it. It means being alone. And we will not say any more about it tonight, but next time we will visit Antony the Great in the Nitrian Desert of Egypt. And he is considered the father of Aramaic monasticism. He's one of 4 of my favorite saints. But at this time, 305 in there, another man by the name of Pachomius started or became the father of what's called Cenobitic monasticism. Cenobitic meaning communal. So that's the kind of monasticism that we think of today, where monastics gather into communities, they serve, they serve. Pachomius started this Cenobitic monasticism and quite quickly established 9 Cenobitic monasteries, again in Egypt. Monastic positions of abbot and archimandrite appeared, so that it began to be kind of a hierarchical structure within Cenobitic monasticism. And both types of monasticism were beginning to grow very rapidly under especially the support of one Athanasius of Alexandria, the Bishop of Alexandria at the time. And we'll visit Athanasius next time. Around 300 AD, let's talk about some of the developments in the church. By now, almost every church had a bishop, and that bishop is a teacher, an enforcer of discipline. He selects presbyters or priests and deacons. He presides at baptisms and Eucharist, and he's ordained by neighboring bishops. Christianity is growing rapidly like the persecution is. There are church offices by now. Lectors, widows, subdeacons, catechists, people who teach catechism, acolytes, virgins, exorcists, doorkeepers, taper bearers, I would imagine.
That's an acolyte.
An acolyte, right. Thanks. Churches in some cities, like Carthage, for example, in North Africa, become metropolitan churches. Christianity is growing in those areas. There are multiple bishops, multiple churches, and so there are bishops in many places that become recognized as metropolitans. We talked about that several sessions ago. Then, beyond that, there are major Christian centers, particularly at this time, or really only at this time: Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch, that are becoming at this time called patriarchal churches. And their bishops are being called papas, which is a Greek word for father, by the laity, which is the origin of the word pope. But correctly speaking, then, at this point, there are popes in Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch, and ultimately in Jerusalem, and ultimately in Constantinople. persecution. Why? Why did Diocletian persecute? Why did he promote all of his subordinates to persecution? This is perhaps an explanation. Could somebody read that?
Of all the gods he respected most, Apollo, who is supposed to be a foreteller of the future, once Diocletian asked Apollo about a certain matter, but the devil answered him, I cannot tell the truth about the future, for the righteous are hindering me, the righteous are destroying our power. Diocletian then asked the heathen priests who the righteous were who were preventing Apollo from prophesying. The priests replied that on earth the righteous were called Christians. Hearing this, Diocletian was filled with anger and fury against the Christians, and renewed the persecutions which had been in abeyance. Then the emperor called for his governors and consuls from all over the empire for a council in Nicomedia. He gathered the princes, lords, and all the senate, and revealing to them his fury toward the Christians. After several speeches by those present at the council, the tyrant announced that there is nothing more honorable and necessary than the worship of the ancient ancestral gods. All received the emperor's announcement enthusiastically. Diocletian and the senate met again a second and third time to discuss the eradication of Christianity. And that's St. Nectarios Press, The Great Martyr St. George, page 2.
Yes.
All right. Make sure you get
Well, you just heard that he called a council of governors, eparchs, princes. There were lots of people there from all over the Roman Empire, and that's where we are tonight. My name is Diocletian, but you can call me Lord. Or greatness, if you can't do that. This is my chief advisor, the wizard. I have searched the empire, and I found that this wizard should become and has become my chief advisor. He can prophesy and predict things, and let's see.
Give me the keys to the Porsche. No.
Could somebody read from the Actist of St. George, Kontakion 2 and Ecos 2?
Beholding the wicked persecuting the Christians, thou didst not fear their wiles and tortures, O divinely wise one, but as a good soldier of Christ. Thou didst distribute all thy possessions to the poor, and didst voluntarily run to that ungodly assembly, singing unto Christ, thy commander in God. Hallelujah.
That's what we did a little bit of what just transpired upstairs. This is the third day of our meeting. You are the eparchs, the princes, the governors from all over the Roman Empire, and we are discussing these pesky Christians. On this third day, a soldier tribune, upon whom I had conferred the title of trophy bearer, came into this meeting, or is coming into this meeting. He's probably not 20, he's pretty young, but an outstanding soldier in the Roman army. Apparently soldiers love him. and are willing to follow him, much like Constantine, perhaps. And so he became the commander of the Royal Guard, I guess you'd say, and was honored by me as a trophy bearer. He's from Cappadocia. He was born of Christian parents, and into the meeting he comes. I probably at the time embraced him because obviously Diocletian really respected what he had done. Perhaps I was even happy to see him come into the meeting, but I didn't know what he was going to say. And in fact, this is what he said.
O Emperor, and you, lords and counselors, you are appointed to maintain good laws and just tribunals, but you are furiously directing your anger against the Christians, supporting crime and issuing wrong orders concerning the judging of people who have wronged no one. You are persecuting and torturing them and forcing into your senseless impiety those who have learned to be pious. But no, your idols are not gods. But do not be deceived by this lie. Jesus Christ is the only God, the Lord in the glory of God, the Father in whom everything has created, and everything exists by the Holy Spirit. Either recognize the truth and learn piety, or else do not confuse with your insanity those who learn it to know the true religion.
The reaction? Could somebody read Ecos 3? I don't know whether I'd let you sit or not after you said that.
Possessing a mind and heart enlightened by the Holy Spirit, by his inspiration thou wast fervent to struggle for the name of Christ, even unto blood. For standing courageously in the faith, thou dost expose the puffed up pride of the ungodly congregation. Therefore we praise thee, O most wise George, thus. Rejoice, shield lifted for preservation of piety. Rejoice, sword raised for the beheading of evil. Rejoice, pillar of faith. Rejoice, wall and confirmation of the Christian church. Rejoice, encouragement of the faithful. Rejoice, fear and disgrace of the unbelievers. Rejoice, St. George, great trophy bearer.
And the reaction, could somebody read Ecos 4? You don't have to read the rejoices.
When Diocletian and the priests of the idols heard words of wisdom from thee, they were enraged with hatred for thee, and even more so when they did say, O tormentor king, wherefore dost thou torture me in vain? For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But it is painful for thee to kick against the goads. Therefore we cry to thee, O George of great fame in this life.
This meeting, by the way, was in early 303. And so, because of what George said in the meeting, because he and Diocletian, Diocletian had respect for him and had promoted him. Diocletian, for a year, subjected him to periods, he was in prison, but subjected him to various types of torture, attempted poisoning, racks, shoes with nails on the inside, all kinds of things, alternated with periods of just being in prison. The long attempt being to get George to deny Christ and worship gods, basically worship Diocletian. by faith he prevailed over that. There was one particular instant that is remarkable. And somebody might read Kentuckian 8 and Ecos 8.
There came to the wicked king a strange and terrible counsel from a certain wizard, that he commanded thee, as proof of the truth of the Christian faith, by thy word to resurrect a dead man. But thou, O St. George, having no doubt whatsoever, didst say unto him, who is not God of the dead, but God of the living, the all-desirable and sweetest Jesus, whom thou didst love with all thy soul and heart, O most blessed George, attended to the fervent prayer of thy faith, speedily commanded the resurrection of the dead man at thy word, for the glorification of his name and the confirmation of the faithful, the unbelievers and blind might be astounded and come to the knowledge of God. For this reason we dutifully cry unto thee.
What the Kentuckian, or what the Akathist does not tell us, is that this chief advisor, wizard, was in fact from North Africa, that at the raising of the dead man, he was there and confessed Christ, and was summarily beheaded.
Okay.
St. George, as I said, was tortured for a year, and eventually he was beheaded in April of 304. What a time. Well, he wasn't the only one that was persecuted. On his persecution and those of many others, Eusebius, in his history of the church, has this to say. Could somebody read that?
I was in these places and saw many of the executions for myself. Some of the victims suffered death by beheading, others punishment by fire. So many were killed in a single day that the axe, blunted and worn out by slaughter, was broken in pieces, while the exhausted executioners had to be periodically relieved. All the time I observed a most wonderful eagerness and a truly divine power and enthusiasm in those who had put their trust in the Christ of God. No sooner had the first batch been sentenced than others from every side would jump on the platform in front of the judge and proclaim themselves Christians. They paid no heed to torture in all its terrifying forms, but undaunted spoke boldly of their devotion to the God of the universe, and with joy, laughter, and gaiety received the final sentence of death. They sang and sent up hymns of thanksgiving to the God of the universe till their very last breath.
Interesting. Well, Diocletian passed in 305. And as I mentioned, Galerius took his place. In 311, as Galerius was dying, the man who had convinced Diocletian to divide the Roman Empire said, quote, "In return for tolerating Christians, they will be required to pray to their God for us, for the public good and for themselves." In 311 also, we see the schism of Donatism. Or heresy. Schism is a better word. It was started by Donatus Magnus in Africa. It was a response to apostatizing under Diocletian. Baptisms administered to those who apostatized and sacraments celebrated by clergy who apostatized were made invalid. What does this remind you of?
Novationism.
Novatianism under Decius. In 314, Constantine's Council of Arles rejected Donatism. It was decreed heretical in 409, and Donatists had to give up their churches. Thank goodness. But it didn't disappear until the Arab conquest of the 7th and 8th centuries. Two years later, in 313, Galerius had died, I mentioned that. Maximin was out, and the east was ruled by one Licinius. Eusebius, this historian, in 313 was present at a battle between Constantine and Maxentius. It was called the Battle of Milvian Bridge. This is the battle where, prior to the battle, Constantine had a vision of a sign, Chi Rho, which kind of looks like that. And the instruction from the vision that he should put this on the shields and other devices of the army. And with the instruction in Greek, by this conquer. And he went to battle, and he conquered. Eusebius was there, and he wrote in quite detail about it. We've often referred to him. He wrote even about a description that we looked at early on about the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem in 70 AD. He wrote a biography of Constantine's life. He delivered an oration in honor of Constantine's 30th year of reign, which was close to the end of his life, Constantine's. He became Bishop of Caesarea in Cappadocia and a Metropolitan of Palestine. In 327, Constantine asked him to become the Bishop of Antioch, and he declined. So out of all this mess, the two that are left are these, west and east. And following that battle, in 313, Constantine and Licinius issued the Edict of Milan, ordering that the persecution of Christians be stopped. That's the Edict of Milan. Licinius didn't really abide by that. He kind of reverted to his old ways. And in 322, Maxentius and Maximus were gone. In 322, Constantine invaded the Eastern Empire and defeated Licinius. Thus, reuniting the Roman Empire under Constantine. That was 322. In 324, he issued an edict that all Roman soldiers will worship God on Sunday, and that Sunday be a holiday from work. So the persecution was over for a while. In 337, Constantine was baptized on his deathbed. In 313, this is my title, Year of the Coming of Age of the Church. What happened in 313? Well, the Battle of Milvian Bridge and soon coming acceptance of Christians, the stopping of persecution, and basically the widespread acceptance of Christianity. The bishop, well, he wasn't a bishop yet, one Athanasius in 313 entered the service of the Bishop of Alexandria, Bishop Alexander. Athanasius, among other things, became soon known as, I guess, the biggest, the most influential antagonist of Arianism and the defender of orthodoxy. But he's just beginning. Paconius, the founder of Cenobitic monasticism, was baptized in 313. And a man named Antony
13, huh?
withdrew to the Nitrian desert in Egypt to find God. Soon he would become known as Anthony the Great. And you'll be reading some of his works as well. So, the end.